Bonjour and good morning, members of the National Security Council of Cabinet. My name is Francisco Chipongin. On behalf of the Privy Council Office Task Force, alongside my colleagues, we are presenting Canada's proposed national security strategy, a directive from the Prime Minister to ensure that Canada remains resilient, integrated, strategic, and economically diversified, a Canada that rises in a more unstable global environment. RISE responds to a clear reality. The global order is shifting, and the pressures Canada faces are directly affecting our sovereignty and economic future. Our objective today is to present a coordinated and feasible strategy that strengthens resilience, clarifies leadership, and aligns economic and national security policies to help Canada meet the moment. Next slide, please. As outlined here, Canada is facing pressures that go beyond isolated crises, with some of these key threats being economic coercion, persistent supply chain disruptions, cyber intrusions targeting critical infrastructure and business, foreign interference in democratic institutions, climate-driven instability, and rising hypernationalism among our key partners, including the United States. These are not abstract risks. They're systematic and interconnected pressures reshaping the global order where economic and national security are now inseparable. As the Prime Minister emphasized at Davos, we are living through a rupture in the world order. The prior assumptions that markets would remain open, efficiency would drive trade, and that geopolitical stability could be taken for granted are no longer reliable. In this environment, resilience is as important as growth, and sovereignty requires deliberate investments. The purpose of this slide is to make clear that the threat environment has fundamentally shifted. Meeting the moment requires recognizing that Canada cannot rely on inertia. We must secure supply chains, modernize capabilities, and improve coordination to build resilience, prosperity, and protect sovereignty. Next slide, please. Global instability is no longer an episodic event. It is persistent and the costs are measurable. As shown here, economic disruptions cost Canadians roughly $1,900 per person each year, with GDP projected to have a lower than normal annual growth rate of 1.25% over the next 2 years under this sustained instability. Canada also loses approximately $5 billion annually due to departmental coordination failures and duplication. At the same time, public trust is also shifting, indicated by 3 in 5 Canadians who now view the United States as a sovereignty risk. Critically, these vulnerabilities have been repeatedly identified. As shown below, reports from the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and the Office of the Auditor General of Canada warn that Canada's national security system remains fragmented with unclear leadership and persistent coordination failures. These risks stem not only from external instability, but from inaction, driving higher costs, slower crisis response, and greater exposure that weakens our strategic autonomy. Next slide, please. Building on the structural threats and rising stakes we've outlined, this slide presents the clear case for change. For decades, Canada operated under several core assumptions: that our closest allies would remain stable and predictable, that open markets would endure, and that geography afforded us strategic insulation. The challenge before us demonstrates that these assumptions are no longer reliable. The chart on the left reflects the shift in public perception. Nearly half of Canadians now identify the United States as the greatest threat to global peace, far more than China or Russia. This is not a rejection of partnership, but it signals growing concern about volatility, trade pressures, and the unpredictability of even our closest relationships. The chart on the right tells a complementary story. While nominal defense spending has increased, defense spending as a share of GDP has steadily declined since the 1950s. As threats have grown more complex, our relative investment and structural coordination have not kept pace with these developments. Together, these trends reinforce that Canada faces a widening gap between the risk environment and our institutional posture. In the next section, we will outline our proposed priorities and policy actions to realign Canada's national security framework with today's realities and ensure we are prepared to meet the moment. Next slide, please.
So, given the current context, the team assessed a wider set of potential priorities, and based on the evaluation of the criteria shown on the left side of the table, we identified the 3 priorities for inclusion in the national security strategy. How did we define the criteria? So, first, urgency is how quickly action is needed to prevent risks from escalating. Acuteness is the scale of harm if a threat materializes. Third, feasibility is where action can be delivered and sustained within the 4-year mandate. And finally, what are the likely economic costs of inaction if not addressed? From extensive research and consultation with experts, Three priorities clearly emerge for inclusion as you see on the top, see across the top of the table. First, we have economic stability, where risks are escalating quickly, with job losses and trade exposures already materializing. There is a strong support to act, and while rollout is complex, the cost of inaction is high in terms of slower exports, weaker growth, and increased exposure to economic coercion. Second, we have military capacity, where procurement delays and equipment getting outdated are leading to constraining readiness and capability gaps. Feasibility is challenged by procurement barriers, but these can be addressed through targeted reforms. Inaction would deepen reliance on allies and forego domestic economic benefits. And finally, third, we have cybersecurity, where threats are immediate and already affecting Canadians and businesses. Now, while jurisdictional silos complicate delivery, a national coordination mechanism makes action feasible. Again, the cost of inaction in this priority area continues to rise as well, driven by growing ransomware and economic losses. When it comes to how we rated these priorities, we placed it high where impacts are already materializing. And we placed medium where impacts relate mainly to execution. Next slide, please. So, based on the priority areas, our team is proposing implementation of the following policies, as you can see on the table. If approved, these policies will work together and deliver clear results. On the economic stability, we propose having a defense venture capital fund that would help keep advanced technologies and talent in Canada and support economic growth by expanding exports beyond US. On the military capacity, we propose having a procurement velocity team that would help reduce approval delays, accelerate delivery of equipments, ensuring the Canadian Armed Forces receive modern equipment on operational timelines rather than procurement timelines. On cybersecurity, we propose having a national cyber incident reporting portal that will enable faster detection and responses to cyber threats, improve national level pattern recognition, and reduce the economic and public safety impacts of major incidents. Now, these policies would also have measurable KPIs in the short and medium term if successfully implemented, which is mentioned on the right side of the table. Taken together, these policies will strengthen Canada's economic base, create more jobs, improve readiness to tackle threats, and enhance national resilience. In the next few slides, my colleagues will walk you through each policy intervention in more detail. Next slide, please.
I'll now explain our proposed Defense Venture Capital Fund. First of all, why these interventions? Every year, Canadians' IP drain to US before scaling up, mainly due to lack of funding. So this IP drain creates a barrier for defense industry development within Canada. So our proposed policy intervention addresses these two problems. So we are proposing to create $1.2 billion revolving Defense Venture Capital Fund for Canadian SMEs and startups. So we would target dual use advanced tech companies who are engaged in AI, robotics, autonomous, and other advanced technologies. So by dual use, we mean the technologies which have applications both for civilian use and defense use. If you look at bottom left box, you'll see a snapshot of our implementation plan, which we elaborated in the appendix. This particular proposal aligns with the recently announced defense industrial strategy, which aims to build defense industry within Canada and retain IP within Canada. So under this fund, an expert panel is going to choose 50 companies, and this fund would invest for long term so that these companies can harden their technology for defense use. On the bottom right corner, we identified the key risks associated with venture capital. Business failure is one of the key risks, which could be mitigated through risk sharing with the partners, private partners who would also invest in this fund. For this fund, we would seek $600 million. The rest of the money is going to come from, would come from private partners if this plan is approved. Next slide, please. Under military capacity, we are proposing to create procurement velocity team. Why? Because defense procurement faces a chronic problem, which is delay. Because of the long delay, new equipment leads to obsolescence. It adds up maintenance and operational costs. So this particular policy proposal is would streamline defense procurement through end-to-end mapping. Through end-to-end mapping, we basically mean from requirement development to awarding of the contracts. If you look at bottom left box, here we provided a summary of our implementation plan. We would implement a project evaluation process, which you'd call PEMA, which stands for Plan, Execute, Measure, and Adjustment. This team would composed of 10 senior advisors from different partners, departments, and agencies. On the bottom right box, we identified key risks and the mitigations technique. For this program, we seek $20 million from the current budget. Next, please.
Now, let me turn your attention to cybersecurity. AI amplifies the cybersecurity incidents and increases our exposure to state-sponsored espionage. So we propose to develop a unified national cyber incident reporting portal. This mirrors the active reporting portals in the UK as well as the Australia. If approved, it would collect and triage threats to trigger appropriate and immediate responses. On the bottom left, you can see the implementation plan. This is an iterative process and we'll correct our course as we go. Two main risks have been identified. The first is the privacy issue. Canadians won't use it if they see it as a surveillance tool. So we are being very honest about the trade-offs. We'll inform Canadians that we'll only take what we need, and we'll inform Canadians that this is to support our critical infrastructure and improves Canadians' resilience to threats. Another risk identified is that Canadians have uneven awareness of cybersecurity. We'll run robust information campaigns for cybersecurity reporting portal, and we are asking for $50 to $75 million for capital expenditure and $15 million per year for operations. Next slide, please. Now, you have seen our policies. The proposed policies, all policies either succeed or fail. They need a strategic and coordinated response. So what we propose here is to have a national strategic coordination housed within the PCAO, which will inform whole of the government about the executive leadership. It's fixing the coordination gaps and not structures. Other countries like US, UK, and Australia have active institutions which inform the Prime Minister on a daily or weekly basis. As national security is a shared responsibility, many experts have advised that it is counterproductive to not inform Canadians about the national security landscape. So we have built in the national legitimacy built in the strategic coordination that we would be publishing annual public threat outlook. And as the program evaluation matrix will include PEMA and the decision making, then we will be iterative in our approach and we would be correcting our course as we go. Next slide, please. Now, this slide tells you what the National Strategic Coordination is and what it isn't. For far too long, the Canadian national security has not had a central place in our thinking about national interest. The Strategic National Coordination is a place where we bridge the intelligence, evidence, and policy gap, and we tackle the vertical accountability. Here, we'll have senior advisors inside PCO who will have access to intel, and they will analyze the information to provide weekly updates to the Prime Minister and annual public reporting. This is a whole of government and whole of society approach, and the threats will be rotated on an annual basis. But I want to reiterate here that all of the Five Eyes, US, UK, New Zealand, and Australia have an institution except for Canada. So this is more like catching up. On the next slide, we'll talk about how to bring our policies to life. Next slide, please.
As shown here, strategy without execution is aspiration. This slide moves us from decision to delivery. Our implementation plan is designed around clarity of leadership, phased execution, and measurable outcomes, ensuring that each policy proposal translates into tangible capabilities. Beginning with the procurement velocity team, which would begin in 2026 with a full process design, establishes streamlined pathways by 2028 and embeds performance tracking by 2030 with one goal: shorten acquisition timelines and close capability gaps faster. The Defense Venture Capital Fund, which would deploy in 2026, invests in domestic dual-use and defense innovation, strengthening Canada's industrial base and reducing dependency while advancing economic diversification. The Cyber Incident Portal, to be designed in 2026 and rolled out nationally by 2028, eliminates fragmented reporting and creates a unified operational picture to improve response speed and coordination. Finally, a national strategic coordination stood up under the PCO in 2026, clarifies leadership, formalizes cross-government alignment, and embeds accountability by 2030. Together, these initiatives shift Canada away from reactive and fragmented responses to a coordinated, resilient, and performance-driven national security architecture. Next slide, please. The diagram below highlights the breadth of partners required to deliver this strategy. It begins with our federal government, with a whole-of-government mission led by the Privy Council Office and key departments, where success depends on horizontal coordination, not siloed action. Beyond Ottawa, provinces and municipalities safeguard critical infrastructure and emergency response. Indigenous rights holders are essential partners where sovereignty and resource development intersect. The private sector operates much of our energy, telecommunications, and supply chains, and the international community supports intelligence sharing and collective security. While this is not an exhaustive list, it reflects the ecosystem required for delivery. At the center of this network is the Canadian public, where our objective is simple: ensure Canadians experience stability, secure jobs, protect data, reliable institution, and confidence in their government's ability to act decisively. Next slide, please. This strategy will only succeed if it is clearly understood and clearly owned by those it affects. Our communication approach is anchored in one central message. This is about resilience and responsible adaptation in a more uncertain world. For the Canadian public, the focus is stability, protecting jobs, securing critical infrastructure, and ensuring families can plan for a future with confidence. For industry and private market, the emphasis is predictability, strengthening supply chains, and protecting intellectual property, and securing conditions for long-term investment and diversification. For intergovernmental partners, the message is alignment, clearer leadership, reduced duplication, and faster coordination to protect our communities. And for our international partners, the message is reliability, where Canada is strengthening its capacity to be a capable, values-driven, and resilient ally. Across all audiences, the through line remains consistent. We are not escalating, we are adapting. We are building resilience, prosperity, and safeguarding Canada's sovereignty and economic future in a disciplined and deliberate way. Next slide, please. In closing, RISE Canada positions Canada to be resilient, integrated, and strategic and economically diversified in an unstable world. Our objective is to realign our national security architecture with today's risks, focusing on economic resilience, defense capabilities, cybersecurity, and central coordination, turning fragmentation into coherence. Together, these policies move Canada from reactive response to proactive resilience. Thank you for your attention today, and now we welcome any questions.
We are so thankful for your presentation, and we're very thankful you got up. You're our first team in the Eastern Time Zone, bright and early on a Saturday morning. So thank you very, very much. You give us a lot to think about here. One of the recurring themes in your presentation is really about Canadians understanding the risks and understanding where we are and sort of accepting the change that needs to happen. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Christina to talk about public support and communications and the role of how best to engage Canadians.
So thank you very much. I do see that you had a nice stakeholder map and key messages for different audiences. I am wondering what, or to what extent, did you anticipate adversaries into certain of these proposals? How would you mitigate, who would be the proponents that would be articulating resistance to the proposals you're bringing forward, and how would you mitigate them? I imagine some of the challenges might be around SMEs feeling included or not, or venture capitalists being there or not. So if you could identify a few of those elements, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. So regarding the response and feedback for our proposals, there are several key elements, as you have indicated, with partners and stakeholders, beginning with those where we may have tension, as you mentioned, SMEs and different subject matter experts that want to be included should be included in these sections. And that is why several of our policies do include sort of reaching out and working with industry rather than having siloed coordination and centralization of power in government. Furthermore, we must also recognize that there is the tension that exists between the trade-offs of requesting funding and redirecting funding from other social programs towards sort of defense capabilities. And to that, we want to ensure, particularly for the Canadian public, that each dollar invested is invested into their security, resilience, and stability of our national security.
Thank you so much. One of the elements that you talk about is really in your strategy about how to collaborate between government and some of the issues around economic security. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Craig to ask a question.
Thanks, Noah, and thanks to the team for your presentation. So yeah, my question is going to focus a little bit on that economic stability piece and your proposed defense venture capital fund. And just looking for a little more detail on how that fund would be structured in terms of accessing resources and building or developing Canadian capabilities. You talk about dual use civilian defense and AI, and the development of a panel to help select projects. How would that panel be selected? Who are you working with in terms of making sure that a panel comes together that can select projects that are worth investing in from a public funds point of view? And second, how do those companies identify themselves to the government? Is there an application process? Is there certain properties or aspects that they have to demonstrate when they're coming forward to be considered by that panel? So a bit more detail around how that selection process would work, so that we're building on needed capabilities within the economy.
Yeah, that's a great question. We detailed our plan in the appendix. If you turn to slide 22, that shows the details of the venture capital fund. Please go to slide 22. There will be an application process. SMEs and startups are going to submit their application, submit their interest, and then expert panels are going to choose from them. There is a jurisdictional scan which we conducted, and there is we did the research. There's a think tank. They propose this idea about creating this venture capital fund, and NATO has it. NATO has the venture capital fund. UK has it. US has it. So we can implement this following those lessons. So of course, in the venture capital fund, there is a risk. So the expert panel is going to be created to identify those promising companies which have dual use. For example, AI could be used for a civilian purpose and also for also for the defense use. There are companies out there already who are doing that. So for example, NATO, there are some accelerator fund where Canadian companies are participating. They're shown to be promising. So the panel would pick those promising companies, right? And the idea is to create a portfolio of 50 companies. Not all of them are going to successful. In our main slide deck, we identified one rule called power rule, which uh, is classic for venture capital because not all of them become successful. Maybe 5% would be successful, but picking those 5 promising companies will offset the loss that we could face. And in every these adoption of new technologies like advanced technologies would help the military to equip with the modern tech within Canadian border. Do you have any follow-up questions? Did I answer your question?
No, thanks for the answer.
I'm gonna, one of the things you talked about is specific risks, and you did, one of your major risks is cyber and dealing with cyber and all the issues around that. I'm going to pass it to my colleague Kimberly to ask a question.
Great, thanks, Noah. So you do outline the potential for cyber threats. And in your cybersecurity plan, you speak to the reporting from Canadian citizens. But I'm wondering how you gave or have thought about addressing the challenges that Canada faces from malicious cyber against the state. So not individual cyber attacks against citizens, but rather malicious events from countries like Russia or China or others who have become very, very good at attacking state cyber infrastructure and putting at risk Canadian critical infrastructure, stealing critical information, be it in the defense procurement space, high technology research, or other things. So not what might be addressed by reporting from citizens, but sort of the bigger cyber threat faced by the country and how you would address that in your strategy. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. If you could please take us to slide 30. So the proposed reporting portal is just something that we want to achieve. We want to get started with identifying what's the magnitude, what it would require to tackle with foreign interference or foreign state-related espionage is upgrading the definition of threats to security under CSS Act 2. That's where we get started. But because it was a time-taking process, we have identified that this is the most recommended option, that we start with the legislation, we broaden the definition of what entails a threat, and then we go from there. As it is a time-taking process, that's why we propose the National Reporting Portal based on what we have learned from Australia. The Australian intelligence has identified just in one report copy of espionage that the federal government was losing $12.8 billion annually, and they have proposed and mitigated the steps that they need to take to avoid those losses. So the National Reporting Portal is just step one to identify the magnitude, but overall to tackle with foreign espionage or things like that, we need to get started with amending CSS Act 2 and giving more power to the Integrated Threat Assessment Center and identifying cyber espionage alongside terrorism. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much. We only have a minute and a half left. I'm going to ask quite a specific question. It seems to me that your procurement velocity team at $20 million over that period of time seems like a fairly small amount for billions and billions of dollars of procurement. Can you talk about how that small intervention may actually have an impact?
Absolutely. The small intervention is, again, we are trying to reduce the number of steps, the end-to-end mapping by special advisors who know the industry inside out. They'll work under the direction of Privy Council, and these will not just be anybody. Like the report, the idea comes from an expert report written by Dr. Wesley Wark that we can reduce, and Ron Lloyd, who is a retired vice admiral. They said that we can reduce the timeline of coordination gap by 50 to 75% if we map end to end. Where are the redundancies? What's the holdup? What's the problem? And then in the step by step, and it's very important to highlight the importance of iterative approach and course correct here. That's what we are doing by the strategic coordination under the Privy Council. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much.